Hello, I'm CJ Johnson. I am a third year studying sociology at The Ohio State University. Before my time at Ohio State University, I was raised in a very small farm town of only roughly 1,000 people in rural Ohio. Growing up in a very rural area, I went to public school online from the comfort of my own home. And although I was physically isolated from a lot of the world around me, I had the amazing opportunity to have my own secret weapon of both socialization and information, the internet. I never liked reading books as a kid, or even now for that matter, to be honest. But thanks to the internet, I was able to deep dive into the amazing stories from people all around the world, as well as the plethora of information that came alongside that. In 2016, I remember stumbling upon Yeonmi Park's speech that she gave at the 2014 Young One World Summit in Dublin, Ireland. I was moved, but I was also furious. My education system had never taught me this. How could my country, which labels itself as one of the best in the world, never have taught me about the plights of others? Why did nobody tell me the North Korean people were living through this hellish reality? During that speech, Yeonmi mentioned ways to help the North Korean people. One of the things she said was, educate yourself so that you can raise awareness about the human crisis in North Korea. And so I did. I began watching as much video-based content on the topic as I could. I watched many more speeches at summits and forums around the world. I read published articles from refugees and survivors and scholars alike. And hell, I even picked up an actual book to read on the topic. I continued to educate myself on the topic, and as my knowledge grew, so did my passion for advocating for change. When I finally did get into university a few years ago, I joined a student-led North Korean human rights advocacy organization in an attempt to better be involved in the communities that had like-minded goals as I. This organization is called Pen Pals in North Korea, or PINK for short, named after our flagship event of writing letters to North Korean refugee children in the Durihana mission schools located in South Korea. Through my work with PINK, we've been able to raise thousands of dollars for North Korean refugee relief funds, as well as hold many informational events to engage the community both at Ohio State and abroad. Shortly after joining the organization, I was elected into the group's executive board role of Research and Development Chair, where I would continue to organize events with the hopes of informing the Ohio State community of the North Korean culture and refugee stories alike. In light of the past year of social distancing, virtual events have been something that terrified me as I came into position as an executive board member. Not only did I have to convince people that this topic was worth caring about, but now I had to do it through a screen. I found that despite these hurdles, we were able to engage in our community and create amazing, meaningful connections with people who really did care. COVID did cut our event attendance by quite a bit, but the plus side to that was that we found amazing quality advocates that were stronger than ever before. The students at Ohio State University that have attended PINK's virtual events have excitedly waited for more and are eager to learn. Even now, I know we have a few of them in our audience. This has made my work with this organization as well as PINK very fulfilling. Recently, we had the amazing chance to talk to a man who has assisted in sending food into North Korea for over 20 years, as he enlightened our small group on the logistical issues and emotional challenges he's faced in that line of work. Hearing about that life-changing work that he has done for so long inspired me to be a better version of myself and keep fighting for these changes in North Korea. This year, I've also had the amazing opportunity to develop my professional and philanthropy-based skills while working with Freedom Speakers International. With the help of Eunkoo and Casey at FSI, I've been able to further materialize my passion for North Korean human rights advocacy into a tangible process within my own community. Specifically, this past month, with the help of FSI and many student organizations at The Ohio State University, we were able to help spread the story of North Korean refugee Ken Ohm and his military experience. After years of consuming pre-recorded and pre-published media, getting to be the MC for an event with a North Korean speaker where we could ask questions directly was life-changing and helped reignite my passion for the work that I attempt to do. At this event, we had individuals from all over the world. We had an individual from Scotland, a group of sorority sisters from Rhode Island, and multiple faculty members from Ohio State University, as well as around 40 members of our undergraduate student body. To have more than 60 individuals show up to an event after an entire day of exhausting Zoom-based classes with the intent to still engage with and educate themselves on the issues that North Korean people and refugees face today is amazing. And by extension, to see all of you here at this, at whatever hour you're watching this at, in the virtual audience, interested and engaged in such an important issue it's awe-inspiring, to say the least. Knowing there are people out there besides me who are just as interested in learning more and educating themselves on the important issues that North Korean refugees face as they adjust their life outside of North Korea is inspirational. I'm honored to be here under the same virtual roof as all of the amazing ladies whose stories will touch your heart and hopefully inspire you to continue to fighting for change. Cherry Yang, Evelyn Jong, Seo-hyun Lee, and Yeonmi Park are all people I continue to look up to for their courage, strength, and willingness to risk everything for a better life. Again, this is an amazing honor and one of the highlights of my life so far. I can only hope that by sharing my own story of involvement within my communities, I can assure you in the audience that the small things that you do to better educate yourself are actually helping and are half the battle. You being here, ready to listen, learn, and echo the voices of these amazing women gives me hope for an even more amazing future. Thank you.
So, hi again. My name is Nayun, and I'm a student at Tufts University. So, today I'll be sharing with you my story on how I came to walk on this journey of helping North Korean refugees and give you some ideas on the many ways that you can walk your own path. So, for all of my life, Korea was a very faraway place, even though I am Korean. I grew up in Japan and the United States, so I learned about Korea, my home country, through the media, including novels, history textbooks, TV dramas, and videos like TED Talks. Yeonmi Park was actually one of those stories I've heard very early on. Even Korean war movies, such as Welcome to Dongmakgol, made me interested early on in North Korea as a country. Those stories, some fiction and some autobiographical, showed a life in North Korea that was vastly and unfairly different from my own life. But these stories of resilience humanized them as agents of change with dreams and hopes of their own, not just passive victims. So I made it my goal to help them by empowering them as human beings, not viewing them as victims. I knew I wanted to get more involved. So before entering college, I decided to take a gap year to live in my home country for the first time in my life. I cared deeply about social issues in Korea, especially regarding human rights, so it seemed right to work on the ground. The first place I found my community was at a university. While learning Korean at Yonsei University, I joined the school's 15-year-old Korean Unification Club. There, I met so many different kinds of students, from Yonsei University students who were simply interested in helping North Korea, or exchange students who came from around the world, and students who themselves had escaped North Korea in their youth. It was incredibly refreshing to volunteer alongside people my age and work with people who cared passionately about these issues, because my friends back at home knew very little or cared very little about these issues. I also had the opportunity to make organic friendships with refugees my age who walked a completely different path to college. The roundtable discussions and the dinner bondings and the late night conversations were some of the most fulfilling moments of this journey that still ground me with purpose even to this day. All of this affirmed me the importance of forming a community around social issues to create momentum and the fuel to power through social advocacy. Beyond school organizations, I found a large community in the nonprofit world. I volunteered for a nonprofit organization called Justice for North Korea, where I used my multilingual skills to translate for press conferences, panel discussions, and publicity content. Some of these photos you see showcase those events. Through this organization, I met volunteers from around Korea and from around the world, and all together, we bonded over hours. We stood on the streets of Seoul for street campaigns. The people I came to meet cared about North Korea through very different channels, some through a religious standpoint, others purely academic, and some drawn by the media, like TV shows. The motivations were all so diverse, but the efforts were all united by the same heart, which was to uplift North Korean refugees to respect their dignity as human beings. This continued to be an important theme. So getting involved while I was in Korea was very easy because of the dense concentration of nonprofits related to North Korean human rights, North Korean refugee education, and North Korean human rights advocacy, and Korean unification in general. So as I returned to the US for college, I was worried with one question on my mind. How could I stay involved? And what could I contribute from the US, where most people know North Korea through Kim Jong-un, not the actual people who live there? My answer was creating my own community. At Tufts University, a North Korean refugee student organization newly formed right as I entered the school. Throughout the year, my club and I organized a variety of school-wide events, a Pepero snack fundraiser on Pepero Day, which is November 11th, an event where we collected USBs to donate to flash drives for freedom, and an art submission contest for a literary magazine, The Underwater Railroad, which is run by a North Korean human rights nonprofit in Seoul. So after working for nonprofit efforts, it was very fun to get involved in small-scale events within my own school. The challenge here was educating and engaging a wider public that was not familiar or interested in North Korea. But I learned through my gap year that it's actually quite easy to hook people into getting interested. The rule is that you must humanize your topic and create empathy. For example, as you see on the bottom right, the theme of the literary magazine was what makes life livable? This is a question not directly related to North Korea, but it is a question that dives deeper into the essence of what it means to be human, whether you're in North Korea, in South Korea, in the US, or anywhere in the world. Humanizing refugees is the biggest advice and strategy and mindset that I have to share, and it continues to be the most important thing I have to share with anyone working in this field. As I worked in the US, I stumbled upon more and more efforts. What led me to FSI, which was called TNKR at the time, was an intercollegiate conference held at Harvard University in the fall of 2019. There, I vividly remember meeting Casey and Eunkoo, and at once feeling so inspired by their diligence and their passion. I also remember the speakers that day, Ken and Yuna Jung, who told stories of finding justice, humanity, and hope. I've read and I've heard countless stories of North Korean refugees by now, but the impact of each one never fades because their truths speak for themselves. I hope that you find that inspiration today through this conference, and I hope to help FSI even from afar so that they can continue delivering powerful stories around the world and touch even more hearts and spark them into action. So my journey of volunteering for North Korean human rights is summarized by one community after another community. I found that volunteering is an incredibly rewarding experience because it increases the surface area for serendipity. and I encounter the most interesting people and stumble upon the most interesting conversations about purpose and service. The people I met through volunteering have some of the kindest and strongest of hearts, and they inspire me far beyond the scope of advocating for human rights. It's also a very humbling experience, and to realize that we're all human beings, the volunteers, the refugees, the people who agree with our cause, the people who disagree, the general public, the politicians, everybody. This is an obvious but unforgettable truth. People often imagine volunteering as a sacrificial act, especially with a capitalist mentality of give and take. But I think this is very misguided. Volunteering is better captured by a quote by one of my favorite poets. Love is a currency that functions in reverse because the only way to be wealthy with it is to give more of it away. I can confidently say my experience of helping North Korean refugees has enriched my life with purpose, fulfillment, and a little bit of wisdom. So I invite you all today to extend your helping hand and be surprised by all the people that await. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Hannah Kim, and I'm a sophomore studying biology at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm here today as a representative of Penn's chapter of Liberty in North Korea. I've been involved with North Korean issues since high school, where I went to high school in Seoul, but I've found new ways to remain engaged in both Seoul and Philadelphia, particularly now in the days of COVID through conferences like this. I'm more than happy to be here today to share my personal story of how I found an interest in North Korean issues, as well as listen to the amazing and inspiring stories shared by all of the speakers here today. Personally, one of my aunts who I grew up with one day explained to me that her family was originally from North Korea, which is how I took interest in the issue initially. Although she grew up in China for most of her life, she had so many interesting and fascinating stories about her trips to North Korea across the river, and I listened to how she worked in a North Korean factory, stories about the traditional markets, and tales of the friends she made while she was in North Korea. It was shocking how little I knew about someone who was so close to me growing up. She had never told me any of these stories until I took interest first and asked her about them. This later took root as an important lesson for myself, that I should always actively listen and take a role in getting to know the stories of people who grew up in different environments than me, particularly those from North Korea. When tutoring North Korean refugee children, I always kept in mind that I have the duty to take interest and actively take an effort to get to know them as people, even if they may initially seem unapproachable or different on the surface. As such, being involved in North Korean issues helped me grow and mature a lot as a person as well. Ever since then, personally, North Korean issues have felt very close to my heart. I took interest in learning about North Korean issues through watching documentaries and movies related to the topic, as well as reading books and watching lectures by North Korean refugees. I felt a sense of companionship in that we are one people, as I am ethnically Korean, and found the same heritage and wanted to take a more active role in advocating for North Korean human rights in the ways that I could. Coincidentally, right beside where I had gone to high school, there was a school called the Heavenly Dream School. Despite our very close distance, I was never able to meet any of the students that went to this school, something I one day considered odd. I then did research on what school it is, only to find that it was a school for North Korean refugee children operated by a church. At the time, I was serving as the vice president of Link at my high school. I then looked into ways we could potentially collaborate with the school to host speech competitions and organize tutoring sessions. Although the process was not immediate or easy, collaborations to come, including eventually those with TNKR as well. Although I unfortunately was not able to continue such efforts as a high schooler upon my graduation, I wanted to continue to involve myself for this cause that I had found much passion and personal significance for, which ultimately led me to join Link at Penn. I was fascinated that there were so many more like-minded people at Penn about North Korean issues than I had thought, and the extent to which people were interested in the cause was a pleasant surprise for me. I realized that it is not easy to care about and continue to care about the rights of people we may potentially never be in direct contact with. However, by being a part of Penn Link, I learned about how much having a community matters and that through collaborative effort, change can be achieved. Going forward, I want to continue to do my part in spreading awareness of the issue of North Korean rights. Regardless of politics or our separation, I have the strong personal belief that we have the moral duty to care for one another as a people. This forum, in many ways, is very meaningful as our efforts at our individual schools are coming together in a collaborative and productive way. While we currently are only able to help through fundraising and donations, we hope to expand our efforts in furthering the cause going forward. Before COVID, my role as communications chair would entail inviting speakers, such as those at this conference, screening documentaries, and hosting interactive initiatives and collaborations with other clubs. Now, during COVID, my role has changed significantly. Efforts are centered around creating online content such as blog posts or Instagram stories to keep people engaged, updated, and continuously interested in the issue during the pandemic. With the help of our team, I post regular updates on club activity and news, as well as make interactive Instagram posts for followers. A lot of people are interested in North Korean news and use our Instagram to follow our newest stories, something we consider a success. As said earlier, my role as an activist for North Korean human rights continued in a much different form after going to Penn. Because fundraising is the main way we can give practical help to the cause, our efforts are centered around planning different activities to raise funds in a meaningful way. Personally, I took the role of communications chair because I wanted to be the bridge between our cause, North Korean human rights, and spreading awareness and the activities that we do to support this cause. Shown on the screen are photos of our work and our club members who have been working tirelessly to further this cause along with me. It has been amazing to find that there was such a heartwarming and genuine community at Penn that cares about this issue even from a far distance, both culturally and physically. Now shown are two of our club executive members who wanted to share their own personal stories of why they're interested in and continue to advocate for North Korean issues.
Hi, my name is Ruby. I'm a part of Penn for Liberty, North Korea. And my first interest in North Korean human rights started with my grandfather, who was born in North Korea before there was even a North Korea. So ever since I was little, I always thought about how different my life would be had I been born on the other side of the border. So, the more I learned about North Korea, I realized that no one deserves to live under such oppression, and I wanted to educate my classmates as much as I could about the issue.
Hey everyone, my name is Joey Lohman. I currently serve as the marketing chair and was the former vice president of UPenn's chapter of Link. I support Link because I want to give everyone the equal opportunity to hopes and dreams and freedoms and liberties that my grandfather had. My grandfather actually escaped when he was 15 years old, and his resilience, persistence, they consistently motivate me on a daily basis. And I just want to be able to give people in similar situations that same opportunity for a better life.
Hi, my name is
Hey everyone, my name is Joey Lohman. I currently serve.
And these are photos from the Awareness Series event held in person on Locust Walk, which is Penn's main walkway on campus with heavy traffic from undergraduate and graduate students. We did an event where we asked students to write down what they wanted to share with North Korean people. This was a way to make helping more personable and to let students know that even their small donations can really transform someone's life. As such, we are working tirelessly to share the importance of the cause on Penn's campus. As much as I personally care about Korean issues, I hope I can make a greater impact in the future as well, whether that be at Penn or in Korea. Being at this conference is definitely one of the first steps to achieving this goal, and I am so grateful to have the opportunity to speak about my experiences and listen to other inspiring experiences at this conference. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hi everyone, my name is Nayun. I am from Seoul, South Korea, and I'm currently a junior attending Princeton University. I'm majoring in English with certificates in African American Studies and Gender and Sexuality Studies. And I've been involved with Freedom Speakers International since last June. And I'm really honored to have been invited to speak at the International Freedom Forum this year. And today, I'm going to talk about how I became interested in supporting North Korean refugees, the work I've been doing with FSI, and lastly, how my involvement in FSI has made me more passionate about refugee rights and advocacy. So growing up in South Korea, I was constantly surrounded by information about North Korea, whether through the news on TV or history and politics classes. In school, we would often watch documentaries about life in North Korea and have debates on whether we supported reunification. In the media, I would also see news about North Koreans who defected to South Korea. Due to the bad blood between the North and the South Korean media did not always portray North Korean defectors in a very positive light. And also, public perception and attitudes regarding defectors have improved much with time. Stereotypes and prejudice about defectors still persist among the South Korean public. Looking back, whenever we would learn about North Korean defectors and refugees, it would be through a very political lens. And so we never really had the chance to think about them as isolated from the dictatorial regime. And more importantly, as individuals just like us, but with unique experiences and hardships. However, what made me really think about North Korean defectors and refugees deeply in a different light was through literature. I love to read, and much of what I have learned about the experiences of North Korean refugees has been through literature. In my high school English class, I remember reading a short story titled Drifting House by Chris Lee, which was about a group of siblings who tried to cross the border from North Korea to China. And I remember being really struck by the absolute horror and the gravity of the story. And it was a chance for me to really empathize and think about the sacrifices, the suffering, and the unimaginable physical and mental trauma that North Korean defectors battle with while trying to escape from North Korea. And after reading Lee's short story, I went online and I came across numerous videos that convey North Korean refugees articulating their experiences of defecting from the regime and resettling in places like South Korea or the US. So this made me realize just how important it is for North Korean refugees to share their narratives and perspectives with the world, and also for people to read and listen to their stories and become more aware of their plight. Last summer, I learned about Freedom Speakers International, and I was really drawn to their mission of empowering North Korean refugees through education, advocacy, and support, and also by enabling refugees to speak out publicly about their experiences. And so I became involved with editing and translating materials for FSI, including public speeches and interviews, as well as materials for repatriation campaigns for abduction victims. And in particular, by reading speeches written by North Korean refugees, I've become a lot more cognizant about the excruciating hardships North Korean refugees endure while trying to escape from North Korea, as well as the overwhelming challenges they face even after they make it to South Korea. Some of these challenges include the legal barriers and complications of settling down in South Korean society, the societal prejudice and discrimination against defectors, as well as human rights violations pertaining to forced labor and human trafficking outside of North Korea. So reading and editing these speeches have enabled me to really realize the extent of the losses and the obstacles North Korean defectors must overcome to seek a better life. My work, however, has not been limited to just helping North Korean refugees. One of my most memorable editing and translation projects was a speech intended to raise awareness about the Bring My Father Home campaign. In editing and translating this speech, I was able to educate myself more about the 1969 KAL abduction case, where a South Korean plane was hijacked and many of the passengers were kidnapped to North Korea. And in reading this speech, I learned how the South Korean government's unresponsiveness led the team on the campaign to seek and garner support from international organizations and institutions. This project again made me recognize the importance of finding platforms to reach broader audiences in order to address humanitarian cases still unsolved to this day. So through my involvement with FSI, I've been able to educate myself more on issues and historical events pertaining to North Korea, as well as advocate for North Korean refugees. In addition, I've also been really fascinated and inspired by how refugees are searching opportunities to share their narratives with the world, whether by giving speeches, doing interviews, publishing books, or even creating their own YouTube channels. And through my editing and translation work, I'm honored to have provided some help to North Korean refugees in raising public awareness and helping their stories reach a wider international audience. So my work with FSI has also motivated me to pursue other channels to advocate for the rights of refugees. And to this end, I began looking into more opportunities in my school that would allow me to help refugees. This academic year, I learned about the Princeton Asylum Project, which is a student-led initiative at my school. And just to give a brief introduction, in order for refugees to be granted asylum, they must first prove that they meet the legal definition of a refugee. However, in most cases, refugees are not guaranteed constitutional rights for legal counsel, and it is up to the refugee to seek legal services to help them claim asylum. And so what the Princeton Asylum Project does is we work with academic experts to create a country-specific report that details the social political conditions of the refugee's country, so that the judge or the asylum officer clearly understands the extent of the asylum seeker's mental and physical hardship and their need for asylum. The project has previously managed cases on topics including political violence, gender-based violence, child forced labor, and ethnic discrimination. So this spring semester, I started working as a student researcher for the Asylum Project. And I'm currently collaborating with a team of researchers to compile a detailed country conditions index to supplement asylum claims and affidavits of expert witnesses on the case. And throughout this entire process, I've been able to conduct extensive human rights research, particularly on laws and regulations addressing gender-based violence, including female genital mutilation and forced marriages. These experiences have really fueled my interest in advocating for the rights of refugees and helping marginalized populations through legal advocacy at large. And to conclude, FSI has motivated me significantly and guided and directed me to more opportunities to help refugees. I'm very thankful to FSI for making me more aware and informed about the hardships of North Korean refugees and for giving me an opportunity to help North Korean refugees communicate their stories with the world. Sharing these narratives and speaking out is often critical to rectifying people's perceptions about North Korean defectors and prompting audiences to help enact change. But the most important thing that my work with FSI has taught me is how students like myself can play a role in helping North Korean refugees by aiding the work of organizations like FSI. I really appreciate how FSI provides so many different opportunities for students to help North Korean refugees through various platforms, whether through editing or translating, tutoring, fundraising, social media, and far more. I want to really encourage students to get involved with supporting North Korean refugees, since you can grow so much personally from the experience while also doing meaningful communal work. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Trinaya Douglas, and I'm currently a senior attending Nova Southeastern University. I am majoring in psychology and also minoring in business administration. So first, I would like to say thank you to Freedom Speakers International, aka FSI, for including me to be a part of this amazing opportunity in this capacity, and for also giving me the space to share my experience working with them. How did I help North Korean refugees? This question seems so simple, yet the idea of me being able to help North Korean refugees almost ceased to exist over a year ago. I had first heard about FSI, formerly known as Teaching North Korean Refugees, when I was looking to intern over the course of the summer 2020 with the Teen Study Abroad program. When I had first heard about FSI and that they were interested in my profile, I was a bit confused at first because after I had done my research on them, I learned and read so much about the many people from around the world that had traveled to South Korea and volunteered to help them teach North Korean refugees how to speak English. I recalled immediately questioning my own ability to speak proper English, yet alone teaching someone else how to speak it. Being from the Caribbean island of St. Kitts, that speaks its own form of patois or English dialect. However, I also immediately remember falling in love with their initiative of giving North Korean refugees the ability to choose. To me, this was an extremely pertinent aspect of FSI's foundation, mainly because it spoke volumes about the organization as a whole, as it made me think back on how times must have been so difficult in North Korea for refugees where they did not have as many choices. An organization that was willing to empathize on such a level really allowed me to see that FSI was not just another NGO, but a true family that cares, welcomes, and champions anyone that is either looking for help or is willing to give it. Upon starting my internship with FSI, I was surprised by their easygoing nature. They gave me a lot of freedom with my role as a research and development intern. I was not sure if this was a good or a bad thing during a time of isolation, especially in the midst of a global pandemic, but I truly made the most of it. Although I was not going to be teaching North Korean refugees how to speak English, doing extensive research on them and their lives allowed me to really delve deeper into the issues that North Korean women face. The majority of the research that I had found about refugees focused a lot on how women were affected. And as a feminist, I felt the need to spread awareness about this gender-based issue. So the next time I had met with one of my supervisors, being Eunkoo Lee, co-founder of FSI, I believe she was already aware of my passion for women's rights, as if it was not always obvious within my weekly research reports. Eunkoo then gave me the opportunity to take initiative and be creative by coming up with a way to not only share this passion, but to also give me the space to create something that would be beneficial for FSI by acting as a fundraiser for one of their new projects catered to helping North Korean refugee women gain office skills, a weekly stipend, and adequate health insurance. I decided to create my very own web conference titled The Lives of North Korean Women. It featured facts about North Korean refugee women, Freedom Speakers International, trivias, prizes, and a speech from an actual North Korean refugee, Lani Park. And never in a million years did I truly believe I could plan something like this on my own. FSI, of course, and a former intern, Megan Everts, were tremendously helpful throughout the process, and the event turned out to be a success. I was able to keep the audience engaged, give them a look into the life of a real-life North Korean defector, and spread awareness about the struggles North Korean women face and how FSI has chosen to help them in such a phenomenal way. Once again, I am proud to say that I was able to be a part of this journey, as it has truly changed my life forever. by giving me a platform and the confidence to pursue my goals of becoming an advocate for human rights, which showed me that I have what it takes to succeed and make the most of this life. I may not have come to Freedom Speakers International to learn or teach English, but in a way, you can say that I too was still able to find my own voice. Thank you.